Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Welcome to another episode of The Disruption Is Now, the podcast about all things AI. I am Greg Matusky. I'm your host, and I'm also the CEO and founder of Gregory FCA, the large public relations agency. And every week we think about what kind of compelling guests could we get on the AI podcast, Disruption Is Now. And I met John Sanei on LinkedIn, and I followed him closely, and I was fascinated by him because he's a futurist, an author, a keynote speaker who has tremendous depth and understanding of technology. But what really intrigued me is he also, on the corporate side, understands change management and management as a whole. And that's really, for me, the perplexing part of where we are right now in the evolution of AI. So, John, thank you so much for taking the time. You're coming to us live from Cape Town, South Africa. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. And did I get that right about your credentials and what we might talk about today?
Yeah, wonderful to be here with you, Greg. And I'm really impressed, and I don't mean this in any demeaning way, but your age group is not so excited about AI in general. And I imagine you're a boomer, right? Am I right in thinking that?
I'm a boomer. I'm 63 years old, John, and I consider
sprightly.
this the second. Look,
Yes.
I consider this the second and final act of my career because I've
Right.
spent so much time in my life
Right.
trying to teach people how to create content and do PR.
Right.
And when I realized the opportunity of generative AI, I said I literally started to tear up, and I could
Yes.
give somebody a tool
Yes.
to help them do their jobs more effectively,
Yes.
other than the way I learned it, which was
Yes.
30 years
Yes.
of trial and error.
Of course.
And when I saw it, I said, wow, this is it. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. And just like
Right.
you intersect so many different disciplines, right?
Right.
Technology, neuroscience, AI. I intersect on the storytelling, writing, human intelligence, and then this tool comes along, which is generative, all based on language, which is always
Right.
my fascination. So
Yes.
it lit me up, and for 3 years I've been immersed in it. But
I can
anyway,
see how
I
lit
talk
up
too
you are,
much.
man.
We're here to talk to you.
I love how lit up you are. It's really awesome to see. I would like to suggest a different perspective because you're only really halfway through your life. There's something called longevity escape velocity. Have you heard the term before?
No.
So longevity escape velocity kicks in a couple years' time. And what it alludes to is the fact that technology and the converging of technologies is doubling our age expectancy for every year that we're alive exponentially. In other words, for every year you're alive, 2 years is added onto it. Every 2, 4, 4, 16, 16, 32. So over the next 10 to 15 years, we have a very good chance of healing the disease called aging. And in this process, you are by far not in the last chapter. You are maybe halfway through your chapter. I would even hazard to say a third of the way, maybe, but we still have a long way to go. So the fact that you're so excited and sprightly about this new technology is fantastic and wonderful. So congratulations on that level.
Well, I appreciate that learning because I always wonder where would have been if this came earlier in my career. And in some ways, I think it all led to the culmination, but in other ways, I think I could have done more quickly with greater velocity. But anyway.
Well, of course, but you had electricity, and that did a lot more than previous. So think about that, and then the internet, and then obviously all the rest of it that's happened. But very quickly, back to your original question, I've always been an early adopter from a very, very young age. And my friends used to always have fun with me because every time they saw me, they would say to me, so what's new this time, John? because I'd always have something new, because that's the way my brain works, always looking at the next thing. I had no idea this was called a trend specialist or a futurist in any way. I was just constantly, from as young as I can remember, seeking out the next brand, the next business, the best business model, whatever it may be. And when I was presenting that to my clients, because I only really started doing strategy and keynote speaking about 10 years ago, and initially when I started out, there was much excitement in the room when talking about the future, and I would leave excited, the audience would be excited, I'm a pretty good storyteller, and then I would arrive back at that organization 6 months later, and exactly nothing had changed, nothing. And this perplexed me, right? So I thought to myself, maybe I wasn't doing a good enough job of storytelling. And then I started studying psychology, and I started to integrate psychology into my work and started to explain to executives what's in their mental state and their psychological perspectives was holding them back from engaging. And again, those books, I wrote 2 or 3 books around that topic, did exceptionally well. The audiences were even more enthused. And then still, I would go back to those organizations and absolutely nothing had changed. And so for the last 3 years, what I've done, or 4 years, what I've done is I've dived deep into neuroscience. And the difference between psychology and neuroscience is what I call the difference between hardware and software. And psychology for the last 100 years has been software. And we've been updating and upgrading our software based on an old hardware machine. And if we think about neuroscience, neuroscience is actually the ability for us to increase the capacity of our hard drive to add more software into it. And if you had to take an iPhone 1 and add iOS 17 to it, what would happen? Nothing would happen, because it wouldn't have the capacity to hold the depth required to be able to go through the processes that it requires. So I think that psychology is becoming less relevant than ever before. And the reason is that, and I'm a big fan of Brené Brown and Simon Sinek and James Clear and all the big names, but we've all read those books, we've all watched those TED Talks, we've all been to those seminars, but the world is taking more Prozac than ever before. The world is more lonely and anxious than ever before, meaning that we have to start looking at a new tool when it comes to engaging with uncertainty. And psychology doesn't cut it. We have to go into neuroscience. And let me just give you a quick brief on neuroscience, just to give you an understanding.
Please do. Go ahead.
Of why it is that we are not adopting new things. Neuroscience is getting better and better, right? It's a new science, quantum science, neuroscience. These are all very new, and we're discovering more and more. And I really realize how little we know about the brain and how it operates. But we are becoming quite clear in the fact that by the time we're 35 years old, plus minus, we're having between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day, of which 90% are the same thoughts as yesterday. And what this means is that our brains have been programmed and educated for outcomes, pattern repetition and pattern recognition, efficiencies and profitability. It's called the economies of scale system. This is what school taught us, universities taught us, and what businesses push onto us.
Say that again. Yeah. They've been programmed. Slow down. Say that again. What have they been, the 3 pillars they've been programmed for? Tell me again.
Outcomes. Algorithmic thinking, which is analytical, logical, outcome-based thinking, efficiencies, and profitabilities. Our brains are designed for outcome, not processes. And this is what you can see. EY got caught cheating on their ethics exams in Europe recently and was fined 100 million euros. And you have to ask yourself, are EY bad people? No, they're not. They're just addicted to outcomes, not processes. So when you go to university, people don't ask you what you learned. They ask you if you got your degree. And when you go to work, people are asking what your numbers are. It's never about the process, it's about the outcome. So this very brain that we have that's been celebrated on familiarity, efficiency, algorithmic thinking, which is always looking for the next logical thing and process to do, is useless in a space and in a world of uncertainty. And so here we are programmed for certainty. Organizational structures are built for certainty, but we are now leading and needing to show up for uncertainty. And this is a very, very deep emotional burden on most people, because with all the degrees in the world and all the money in the world, you're not trained and ready for uncertainty and to show up with optimism, curiosity, and excitement. And this becomes a process of understanding neuroscience and then applying that neuroscience to AI or whatever the next technology may be.
So uncertainty is
Yes.
at a height right now that I've never seen before. Uncertainty
Yes.
in the world, uncertainty in our businesses, certainly uncertainty with AI, even using the tool, right?
Of
If
course.
you use it, I'm a writer. Uh, 10 people who know how to use OpenAI or know how to use Copilot could come up with 10 dramatically different approaches, all of which have value.
Yes.
And that's uncertainty that was never baked into the system before, because in the hierarchy process we used to have, there'd be a draft, it'd be collaborated on, it'd be moved forward upon a path, and then there'd be agreement. Today, right, AI is not software. It doesn't give you 2 + 2 = 4. It may give you 2 + 2 = 10 with a whole new rationale that would lead you in different directions, which I find, and my writing colleagues find, very exciting, because they're not coders, right? They're not looking for consistency. They're looking for outcomes of meaning, messaging, narratives, right? And they know that there's a lot of different pathways to get there. So help me out what I just told you, help me out understanding it from
I think
neuroscience.
but I think creativity loves uncertainty. That's the point of creativity. But the world we live in doesn't celebrate creativity as much as it celebrates outcomes, accountants, efficiencies, profitabilities, and making that money at the end of the month or the end of the year. And so, yes, as creatives, we have this new amazing tool that we can play with. But the very structure of economies of scale hates uncertainty. It is baked in to look for certainty and an addiction to certainty more than anything else. And because this very addiction to certainty is not available to us anymore, there's an emotional upheaval around the world. There's a thing I use in my talks, that we're in the largest transformation ever known to man. And transformation has 3 phases, all transformations. The first phase is sadness. Sadness to leave the shore of familiarity, sadness to leave your comfort zone, and sometimes sadness to leave your identity that you've developed over the last 20, 30, 40 years, that all of a sudden becomes irrelevant. Now,
That's really important.
Yeah.
That identity part is
huge.
Important.
Of course.
I mean, I'm a writer. I'm an artist.
Yeah. Not anymore.
I can never, no one ever can recreate what I do. That's what I do.
Exactly. And now what you're doing is, my identity as an accountant, as a lawyer, as a strategist, any service is becoming less and less relevant. And now I've still got another 60 years to live. I'm like, oh my God, there's panic in the air, right? So the first stage of transformation is sadness. Now the second stage of transformation is strangeness, because you're not quite who you need to become. You're not quite having the skills that are required for the world. The world is still trying to figure itself out. It's not like it used to be, but it's not also like it's going to be. So you're stuck between this sort of strange world. And we're only really beginning this journey into the strange world. But here's the clincher, is that you cannot think your way through this. You have to feel your way through this. And what do I mean by this? Is that when you don't process emotions of sadness, it shows up as anger. And it was C.S. Lewis who said it best. He said, I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her name was grief. And so what we have in the world today at large are a set of people that are sad and angry, having to deal with levels of uncertainty when everything they were told in education, organization, and even some religions was the fact that if you follow these rules, everything will be fine. And we followed these rules and nothing is fine. And so now what we are is sitting with sadness, anger, frustration, and now we have to deal with a strange new world. And all of a sudden, the strange new world doesn't become exciting, but it becomes dangerous. And so when you ask me about AI, you're excited, I'm excited, but 99% of the human population are terrified.
And I think it's interesting, when I first saw it, I'll go back to what you said earlier, that you would give these seminars and everyone would be in agreement and excited, and then you'd come back a year later and nothing changed. That was my experience with trying to teach people how to write, because I really believe that writing, you have to create a neural pathway, and that takes if you're a human being, that is, and that takes a lot of work and revision, and you got to really refine that. And it's 2 things. 2 neural pathways. One is data, right? It's the verbs, it's the syntax, it's the grammar, which really it really, really paralyzes most people when they start and they haven't mastered that. And the other is thinking. While you're managing this neural pathway of the data, you also need to manage the intelligent pathway. And if you do that long enough, they converge, right? And I saw the pain in my own life of going through that practice for hundreds of hours, right? Hundreds of thousands of isolated hours. And then when I saw AI, I wasn't sad. I was joyous. I was so relieved that other people wouldn't have to go through my journey. So relieved that I could advance other people's careers and understanding. And I did fall into that strangeness. I mean, for the first 6 months, I just consumed everything I could about it because it was so strange and so weird and wonderful, right? And just opened my mind to how human beings think, because I really think it reflects somewhat the way we think, or it does a good imitation of reflecting how we think. And then I ran into all the dangerous people, right? And they beat me up, right? Every time I go, if I could be at a cocktail party and people would tell me why it's going to ruin civilization. I could be at a campfire and people tell me why AI generated art is worthless.
It's not that they're not defending that. They're defending their familiarity. They only are able to defend what they already know. And when it is something they don't know, they will come out fighting, blaming, shaming, and not taking any responsibility. So yes, they might say art will be worthless and they might say all those things, but that's not actually what they're defending. They're defending their own identity in the old world.
Fascinating. I'll give you a quick identity story.
Go ahead.
I went out to dinner recently with a couple, and the woman had been on this prescription drug for 30 years.
Wow.
And she had a chronic disease and she fought through it. And she said her doctor retired. She recently went to a new doctor, and the new doctor put her through this test and said, "You don't have that disease. You've never had that disease."
Okay? Oh my God.
And I thought to myself, if that was me, I'd be so excited. I'm disease free. She said to me,
"Yeah.
Do you know that's done to my identity?"
Yes.
And I'm thinking, what was your identity? A sufferer, a victim? I would have been doing backflips. It's like an old story my father used to tell me. He once went into a bar and there was a guy there sitting next to him. They strike up a conversation. He tells him, "I recently regained my eyesight." He goes, my dad goes, "Oh, that's amazing." And the guy goes, "Yeah, but I still can't see too well." So these identities, right, they really do trap us. And if we're not ready to change.
Yeah, but look, you become addicted to lives you don't even like. Your addiction is the life you don't like. The victim mindset, the poor me, the anxiousness, that's an addiction. That's all it is. It's an addiction. And we don't realize that it's an addiction because it's such a deep part of our identity. When you start to look at neuroscience, you realize that your identity is really just neurons that have wired and fired together for the last 20, 30 years. And if you can get the opportunity to unwire and unfire, you literally will create a new personality. And so you see where my work's gone. It's gone from, go on.
Do you think AI gives you that opportunity to rewire?
Yes, of course it does. No. Not AI itself. Your ability to engage with it in an adaptable way, absolutely. If you are stuck, AI is the worst thing that's ever come to you because it's making your existing world even more topsy-turvy. So exciting.
I get it. Great point. That's a great point. Go deeper there. So for those that are very consistent in their worldview, right?
Yeah.
This could be the worst thing ever.
Worst thing.
Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Why? Because it doesn't fit into anything they've ever perceived, expected, experienced at all in any way. And so what happens is that there's a great line that I live my life by, and it's strong opinions held loosely. And the problem is that most people think their opinions are facts, and those facts create their identity. And if it doesn't fit into their facts and identity, then they delete, distort, and generalize it and don't engage with it and attack people like you and me because we are becoming in too optimistic about something that they are scared of. And so my
That's
work has gone.
interesting. I always tell.
Yeah. Go on.
Go ahead.
No.
No, I always tell my wife one of the great things about discussing or AI with people is I never have to argue with anyone. I always conclude by saying, could be,
Yes.
It'll ruin civilization. Could be. It'll cure cancer. Could be.
Yeah.
And for the first time, I have these opinions that you just said. This is a great line. I'm going to steal it from you. That I hold loosely. Right.
Strong opinions held loosely. Yeah.
Understood. That's fascinating.
Because Greg, you don't know and I don't know. And the wise amongst us know we don't know. The less you wise, the more you think you have to know. And that's the difference between intelligence and wisdom. And this is what I speak about in my talks, is that we don't need any more smart people. We have enough smart people in the world ruining the world. We need wise people. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to keep two opposing thoughts in your head at the same time and be okay with both. That is the highest form of wisdom that you can have. And really, the biggest part that we can do to prepare for what's coming is a quote from Einstein that really lands it better than any quote I've heard. And he says, and you must probably heard this before, you cannot solve a problem from the same awareness that created it. So if your current awareness has been educated into you because of the Industrial Revolution, the economies of scale, efficiency, profitability, and outcome-based thinking, and now you're trying to find solutions in a world of exactly the opposite, which is total uncertainty, total lateral thinking, total unpatterns. I mean, the whole thing is up for question. Everything we implicitly trusted, we can't trust anymore. Everything from education to politics to the dollar to religion to everything that once was absolute gospel is not gospel anymore. And so what you have now is your ability to ask yourself this question. Is what is my awareness? And why is my awareness stuck to an old story? And how do I change my awareness to engage with something that I'm uncomfortable with? And so ultimately, what is awareness? Awareness is your personality. And if your personality is this thing that's been created by you, then what is your personality? And your personality is made up of three things. It's made up of how you think, how you feel, and how you act. And if you wake up every morning and 90% of your thinking is done the same as it was yesterday, which means that your personality never changes, means your awareness never changes, means that the future looks scary because it's not familiar. So the only question executives have to ask.
Very fascinating things, even your Einstein quote, right? That you can't start a solution. I'll get it wrong. Solution by
you cannot solve a problem from the same awareness that created it.
Okay. With AI, that's very true, right? It gives you a place to explore all kinds of vectors into something, which may make no sense at all, but it may come up with that one singular idea that it puts disparate ideas together that didn't start from the place of the problem, right? I've managed to bring together within my firm a coalition of the willing. And these are people that are just willing to try it, right? I put down last week, I had a debate going, right? I created two editors. One was very diplomatic and thoughtful, and the other was more crass and direct. And I had them review some of my content, right? And it was very interesting. They went back and forth on OpenAI, on ChatGPT. And they gave me insights I would have never seen in my life. And that ability to kind of manage opposite viewpoints. I'll give you another example, right? Look, I run a business. I'm a capitalist. Universal basic income, for years, I would just think that's going to promote laziness, right? And then you think about where we're going with AI and where companies could eventually become almost autonomous revenue generating enterprises, where there are some companies like Amazon that may not ever need people. I know everyone wants to always say you still need the human in the loop. There are lots of functions that we might not need humans in the loop, right? So if we have this opportunity, right, and we have additional time on our hands. And the work week and the amount of work that people are working every week has gone down and continues to go down, right? What will we do with that, right? If these autonomous revenue generating enterprises were taxed, maybe jobs that were never seen as jobs before that have great value, like being a parent or an uncle or a volunteer or raising food for your community or raising awareness, maybe we would have the ability to pay for those and they would be legitimized jobs and we could do better for everyone with them. And so this has been very conflicting views in my life. I mean, for years I had one view and now I see what the future holds and I'm thinking we have to adjust. We just can't go on like that. What will people do for a living if they're given more time? Will they just watch Netflix and play video games? What good is that to the value of mankind?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I love your enthusiasm, Greg. I mean, I'm sure you're like 30 years old in that 60-year-old body. So congratulations to you. Greg, I think that trying to apply universal basic income in our current level of awareness is not something we should try and do. We are not taking into account the vast amount of changes that will start coming in the future. So universal basic income, the idea that capitalism will stay like it is right now, the idea that the dollar will continue to be the world dominant, the idea we're only taking our current understanding and then applying universal basic income to it. So I think we should stop trying to do that because it's not going to be a fruitful exercise. I think a good analogy to think about is that in the agricultural era for 10,000 years, 98% of us were farmers. 98% of us added value to the world through our physicality and understanding the seasons. Today, 1.3% of the human population are farming and we're making more food than ever before. But you and I aren't trying to push harder than a tractor. You and I aren't trying to run faster than a car. That's not our jobs anymore. Our jobs aren't physical anymore. They're intelligence. But here we are where AI will replace our intelligence by a long shot exponentially, which means that we can't even think about ourselves as intelligent beings. We have to think about ourselves as emotional beings. Just like we don't think of ourselves as physical beings anymore, intellect will be replaced by emotional currency. And I know this might sound a little bit hoo-ah, but that's what futurists do. They come to tell you things that are making you uncomfortable. We don't quite know what the currency will look like, but we do know it's not logical thinking. We do know it's not outcome-based focused. It's not that, because that's been taken away from us, just like tractors took away physicality from us. So for me, the biggest drive here is how do you create an emotionally aware human being that is able to deal with change in a calm fashion. That's it. That's all you have to do. And when you have that, then the lens that you look onto the world with is one of optimism and curiosity, not dread and triggeredness into the past.
That's an awesome message, John. I mean, having been in business myself for 34 years, the only thing that is a cliche, the only constant is change. And maybe that's what made me so prepared for the AI change, where if I was an employee, I'd look at it more as a threat. But I do want to get a real business outcome here from our conversation, because I only had you for a half hour, and I really respect your time.
Sure, thank you.
What would you tell organizations about how they have to manage and affect real change now that AI is upon us within the enterprise?
Yeah.
What advice could you give them?
Absolutely. I mean, I work with enterprise all the time, and I have seen digital transformation after digital transformation after digital transformation fail constantly all around the world. And the reason is that you are trying to bring on a new patterning for business onto an old structure. The new world we're moving into doesn't operate in economies of scale anymore. It now operates in economies of learning. It's a very different business model. And so what we have to do, and what I always suggest to all my clients, is there's two very key things that I've picked up through my research. The first thing is that we have to identify and really start to bring a description to the word innovation and disruption. They are vastly different contexts, vastly different actions. And let me give you innovation. Innovation is doing what you did last year, more modified, more efficiently, and bringing about incremental change in an existing system to maximize profitability and drop costs. Perfect. We've been doing this for 200 years. We understand it. That's innovation. Disruption, however, is totally different. Disruption is making your current business model obsolete to create a new business model. What we're doing, because we're so addicted to efficiencies and profitability, we ask our existing teams to be both innovative and disruptive. And guess what? Impossible. Because you are not able to have the awareness to look for disruption from inside the bottle. As the saying goes, you can't read the label of the bottle from inside the label. It's an impossibility. And there's another great quote that says, we don't know who discovered water, but we know it wasn't a fish. And so we have this ridiculousness of executives being put into creative camps and asking them to think out the box. Well, are you asking your creatives now to become AI specialists, data scientists, gaming specialists? They don't know these things. Why would they know these things? They weren't hired for these things. So my suggestion is continue the digital transformation on your existing organizational structure, but build a tomorrow team. Build a team that sits in parallel to your existing organization that's not caught up in legacy, that is only thinking about your business sector over the next 24 to 36 months. 48 to 36 months. And these people are not caught up and anchored into old ways of thinking. It's almost like having a jet fighter next to your Boeing. We don't want to kill the Boeing, but don't expect the Boeing to be a jet fighter. And stop asking your executives to think like disruptors because they don't know how. It's not within their construct. And a great example of this is Zara. Zara was worth $19 billion in 2019. Today it's worth $11.2 billion. What happened to a third of the business? Shein happened to the third of the business. Shein came in and wiped out a third of the market share of Zara. And you got to ask yourself, why didn't Zara come up with Shein? Because their awareness is stuck in economies of scale. Shein is running a business model called economies of learning. Zara didn't even see it coming and still hasn't caught up. And so I can give you umpteen of these examples that existing executives often don't have the skills or the awareness to see a world ahead of them that's very different to their old world. And so I sit on boards as a Chief of Tomorrow board member, and I see this continuously. Boards are hired based on experience and legacy. Oh my God, that is the worst thing you could do. Bring people in with legacy thinking to make decisions about tomorrow. It's called the American government. You guys are doing it right now. You have 90-year-olds trying to make decisions about tomorrow that are based on legacy thinking. And guess what's happening to your government? It's not what it used to be. That's what's happening to your empire. Your empire is crumbling right in front of our eyes because your decision-making process is based on legacy thinking, not futuristic thinking. Guess who's kicking your ass and is in thinking? Middle East. All of a sudden, Saudi and UAE are thinking exponentially ahead. Why? They're almost a tomorrow team of their own. They don't have any legacy thinking. They don't have any past, so they can only think for the future. So that's the first bit of suggestion I have. I have another one. Do you have any questions on this one before I jump into the other one?
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Keep going.
The other one I suggest, and I do a whole workshop on this, is called the AI Opportunity Radar. And this radar is a circle with four sort of sections. And what I always tell my clients is that you can't think of AI as an IT project, which is what most organizations do. They're like, just tell IT to take care of AI and we'll continue doing what we're doing, right? And so that doesn't work anymore. And so what we have to think about AI is in 4 quadrants. And if you have to just think of a circle, the top part of the circle is external. The bottom of the circle is internal. In other words, are you using your capabilities to bring more efficiencies or change your core structure of your business using AI? Or are you looking at upending your sector or changing the way your customers experience your business? This splitting AI into these 2 already gives you an opportunity to think about capabilities, capital, and ambitions in very different ways. Then go one step further, and you take this circle, which is on top external, and on the left of the circle, you have today, and on the right of the circle, you have tomorrow. In other words, are you using AI for internal efficiencies, or are you using AI to bring better pattern repetition and pattern recognition for your customers in today's world? Or using AI to change your core offerings internally, or you're looking to upend your organizational sector totally. 4 different quadrants that you have to choose which one you want to play in. 1, 2, 3, or 4. But don't ask IT to now think of AI and bring more efficiency to existing business, change your core benefits, make sure your customer's having a totally experience, and be disruptive all in one go. Guess what you're doing? You're doing nothing. Actually, you're doing absolutely nothing if you think one person or one team's going to do all four. So the whole thing about AI for me is that complexity is the enemy of execution. And when things are so complex and so large and you haven't simplified them for your teams, they're not going to implement anything because it's too complex. So my job is to simplify capabilities, ambition, and focus, firstly into today and tomorrow teams, and then into the 4 quadrants of the AI opportunity radar.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us, John. You've given me so many ideas. I feel like I'm at a Brazilian steakhouse, right? There's all kinds of good things to eat. I don't know where to begin and I don't know where to finish, but it was a fascinating conversation. Where can someone get in touch with you if they want you as a keynote speaker or as a consultant or to work more on these ideas of tomorrow, let's say?
Yeah, good. My name is John Sanei, S-A-N-E-I. Out of the 8 billion people in the world, I don't know how lucky I've been because there's only one John Sanei out there. So if you look up John Sanei, I'm right across all social medias and I'm constantly sharing what I'm learning because I'm so excited about the space that I'm constantly, like, if you watch on LinkedIn, I'm launch a video twice a week, TikTok twice. I'm constantly sharing because I think it's imperative to try and give people some level of stillness and an anchor point into the responsibility they have into themselves to become more adaptable for what's coming.
Well, thanks for being with us from Cape Town. I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate your time. And let's stay in touch. I mean, it was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Greg. Thank you. Nice to be here with you.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.